Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, you got MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well and welcome back to another episode of the 50 most relevant, counting down who I think are some of the most relevant players to have a fantasy footy conversation for your Supercoach, Dream Team and AFL fantasy sides across 2023. We're into the final 30, number 29 today, Lachie Neale. Depending on the format you play, you might be thinking this guy's way too low in the 50, while others are going, no, it's about right. Regardless, we're going to have a good chat today about Lachie Neale's fantasy prospects. Throughout this series of the 50 most relevant, we always love to get guests and content creators from across the fantasy footy community. If you're a draft coach in any of the formats, chances are you're very familiar with the draft doctors. The man behind it all, Stevie Fizz. Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm good, MJ. Yourself?
I'm doing very, very well. Lachie Neale's an interesting guy, and we always talk draft rankings at the very end of the podcast, but he has been historically this player. We'll look through the stats in a second of his past few years, in particular as a Lion, but he's always been this guy that relatively early on in our drafts, he's been a muchly desired player that people want to get into their sides.
Yeah, 100%. He's, a good captain option and reliable. He has a good role and he's got a good history. So he's a good guy.
Yeah, he's been very, very solid for us for such a long time. 29 years of age, midfield eligible. And last year, there's some really nice high scores. A 145 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team was against the Bombers, his top score last year in that format, while a 198 in Supercoach. Yep, almost hit the 200 club. Was not just his top score for the year, but his top Supercoach score ever. While his career highest score in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team was just a few years back, while still as a Lion, though. In 2019, it was 169 against the GWS Giants. His average is a 107 in Fantasy and Dream Team. It means in those two formats, he's going to be priced just a touch under 950K in Fantasy and just a touch over 970K in DT. While Supercoach, one of four players to hit the magical 120 plus average. He went 122.8 with a price point of $676,200. And Steve, there was kind of an evolution of Lachie Neale a couple of years ago. It really started in his Brownlow medal year of 2020, where he was for so often seen as just a really good Supercoach guy with one good fantasy year, where he's such a good contested player. But really over the past 2 to 3 years, we've started to see him move not just to be a clearance player, but be able to really be an incredible midfielder for the Lions.
Yeah, he's taken it to a whole new level. He gets inside, he gets outside. He really does it all. So yeah, that's why you love to take him at the top of your draft.
Yeah, it really is. Contested footy, uncontested footy, clearances, stoppage clearance, handballs, and started to become a goal-kicking midfielder too, which has been really helpful. If we look at his season across the board, the formats, pre-buy, he was going to a 115.6 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, so well ahead of the 107 he's priced at. Post-buy, a little bit slower though, went at a 94.5, 13 tons across the season though, 4 of them over 120, and just the 3 scores sub 80. While over in Supercoach, while he does have the average of 122.8 across the season, the splits are pretty important. 130 pre-buy, 111.8 post-buy, 19 tons, 11 of them 120 plus. Just the one score failing to get over 80. And he ends the season ranked 8th in Dream Team and Fantasy for total points, top 10 for averages, while he's your number 1 scorer in Supercoach for total points and 3rd for averages. There's a pretty good correlation too between when he plays well, the Lions win. And while a lot of people in salary cap format, Steve, are going to be talking about Will Ashcroft this year, there are 2 other pretty significant inclusions to that Lions side. One in the midfield in Josh Dunkley. We'll talk about him, I'm sure, in a minute. The other's Jack Gunston. This team should only be better again, and he scores incredibly well when his Lions team win.
Yeah, they look stacked, absolutely stacked. So yeah, you're probably right. Josh Dunkley's the guy to talk about. But
yeah, well, so 76 games he's been a Lion, and in that time, he's averaged a 107.3 in Dream Team and Fantasy. That is using some number jujitsu of the 2020 season, if you want to play the adjusted averages, but it certainly does really reinforce what he's done the seasons around, while he's gone at 118.5 since he's been a Lion at Brisbane. So we know he's good. We know what he's done, but reality is what he's been only helps inform a decision for the future. So there are 3 things I want to talk to you about, Stevie Fitz. Let's talk about the one we just alluded to, Josh Dunkley. The presumption is he's coming into the team to play midfield. How do you see Neale, Dunkley, McCluggage, Lyons? How do you see this Lions mix working out, and does it impact his fantasy output?
How it works out is probably interesting. I'd suggest McCluggage probably spends more time on the outside, which we've seen him do in the past. He's a good goal kicker. He has that running capacity on the wing. I don't know that Lyons has too many gears, so probably inside's good for him if he's playing. I know there's been speculation he doesn't play or whatever, but I don't think Dunkley can be good. Like he's such a good player. I look at the things Dunkley does well. They're the things that Neale does well, and Neale does them in such massive capacity. I personally think the way has to be down. That doesn't, and I always think like scoring less doesn't mean you're a worse player. He could be the same player. He just doesn't have the same volume. Yeah.
No, it's a really good point. In terms of tackles, which is what a lot of people presume Dunkley will be the thing he does best, which is that defensive pressure, which we correlate immediately to tackles. He averages still about 4 per game, Neale. So it's not like he's losing out there, but really you're highlighting the fact of it's another big body. It's another guy that's going to be winning football and picking up tackle counts through there. I think that's a fair summation, mate, as well.
Well, I think, and there's more to it. Like Josh Dunkley was one of the highest marking midfielders in the league last year. But where Neale is at the top is ground ball gets and contested ball. And I look at the team Josh Dunkley was in last year. That team was so good at both of those things. Josh Dunkley could probably average. I think he can get better in Brisbane. It just like I look at the Bulldogs midfield and it's just stacked. Whereas that Lions midfield, it probably now becomes stacked.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So the Dunkleys that are concerned that we want to keep an eye on, and the problem is in the intra-club matches, you never see that. They're playing against each other, so you can't see it. In the practice matches and the community series, let's be honest, as much as we can garner some things loosely positionally, these are not teams and players that are going full pelt at the game. Unless you're trying to win a spot in the best 22, you are not on the accelerator. When you're a player like Neale, it's just about getting through. When you're a player like Dunkley or McCluggage, it's like, just keep fit, just keep healthy, just keep swimming, and you'll get your way kind of through this. So as much as we might think we'll learn from the preseason games, he is a very interesting one, and that Lions midfield mix is hard to get a read on until we really do hit the season proper.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing is Lachie Neale's going to be front and center.
Correct. Yeah, so you know where he's going to be. It's what happens around him and what that clip may or may not be becomes the element. Let's talk about the tag. In drafts especially, it hurts because it hurts everywhere, but in drafts, the average out doesn't matter as much to your total points that you accumulate from the year. So we know he's going to cop a couple of these at various points through the year. He's getting better at them in terms of how he handles them, and maybe Dunkley will help with that. But what's your philosophy? Again, more draft is your specialty, but with a guy with such a bad, that's maybe a bit too strong of a word, a history of a tag comes and it does limit his output to such a way he doesn't resemble his best. How do you go about ranking that in your draft, or is that not a factor at all?
It might be if I was trying to choose between him and, say, Clayton Oliver in my rankings, that might be one of the deciding factors in the end. Like if I was trying to split hairs, you know what I mean? It might be him and Touk Miller. I have them the same, but push comes to shove. Because they're the guy you want as a captain, and that's why it hurts.
Yeah, exactly right. Look, from a tag perspective with Neale, mostly you can predict it based on the matchup of his opposition. So he's the kind of guy that we always get the occasional, like Mark O'Connor from a few years ago, just turns up and randomly surprises everyone. But for the most part, you can check the team, the matchup, and get a good indication to go, right, this isn't the week to put the C on him or run the VC loophole against him. So that's helpful in terms of a fixture perspective. Their first 6 weeks are against Port, Demons, the Dogs, Pies, North, and Giants. From a salary cap perspective in there, they've got 2 Thursday night games and 1 Friday night game in the first 5 weeks, and they don't have a Sunday game until round 11. The reason that matters is he becomes a prime VC candidate for you early in the week, so that if you're going, oh, I'm not too worried about Dunkley, or I think that will only protect him a little bit more, but that might be the narrative you tell yourself, then now he does start to become a consideration, because you're going, if you're spending that much cash in your salary cap on him, it's because you think he's a VC or C almost every week. Otherwise, you're overpaying for what your projected outcome of him is. So that might be the swayer for you. In terms of how he goes with Dunkley, I guess we'll know. I think you're right that there's some potential clip, but he has scored well with Lions. But Lions and Dunkley, while they do have similarities in some things, they're also not really the same player to contrast them, are they?
No, they're not, and it's just another guy. Like you look at, well, who does Hugh McCluggage replace on the wing? Like that. That's where kind of where I think it's the overall volume. But I mean, like you said, when he scores well in the wins, and on paper they should be winning a lot.
Yeah, they really, really should. From a fantasy perspective, he averaged 113 last year in Dream Team and Fantasy in wins, and a 122 in Supercoach in wins. So oddly enough, the parallels between wins, losses, and his averages of tagged and non-tagged games, they almost line up pretty in alignment along the way. There's a little bit of gap between them, but they're certainly sitting alongside each other. Look, for me, if we're to break down the formats, in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, if you don't think he's someone as to VCC in your starting squad, upgrade target, plain and simple. Supercoach, I think there's a conversation you can have that he'll be in and around the mark as a VCC option every week in your starting squad. And if you've got any hesitation that Dunkley hurts him, upgrade, plain and simple. If you're not worried about Dunkley and what it might do to his scoring in the side, if you think it only helps, well, then now it's there, because historically, Supercoach has always been the format he's been an absolute beast and a weapon in. He could be a burn man for you in every sense of the way. You could be paying top dollar for a guy that's going nowhere near it, or he could burn you the other way, where you are just eating dust, because he's the kind of guy that can go 130 in DT and fantasy, 150 over a 6-week stretch, and all of a sudden, your season's done in your salary cap formats. Let's talk drafts. This is where you really are coming to the format. You're going to earn your big bucks here, because we pay about as much as the draft doctors do, man. So where is he going on draft day? It's probably different each format, but where do you kind of rank him at the moment?
So I've got him in the early M2s in Dream Team. I just don't have that up at the minute. And I've got him at M7 in Supercoach at the minute. So I'm probably not getting him. And I think, and that's kind of like one of those things where you can draft him and he'll probably be fine. Like he should be fine. Like I say, he'll come back a little bit in average. I don't think it's going to be enough to kill you.
No, that's right. And really if he's 7th midfielder, that's probably mid to late first round, depending on what people do with the big forwards, the big back.
Yeah, I'd expect Dunkley and Doherty to be in that mix for going before him. So I think he's going to be around that 10th pick.
Yeah, I think that's right. On the turn in the first in Supercoach, and fantasy probably maybe fades around later than that.
I'd say fantasy is probably in that probably late 3rd.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like when you rank a player versus where the community with the ADP, or where they might be tempted based off historical average, is always there. So I'm with you. I'm in a similar place that where I rank him, I probably just won't get him. Not because I don't want to own him. I just, someone jumps ahead.
Yeah, if he falls to me, I'm fine taking him. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been, barring one season, one of the most reliable 100 plus guys in AFL fantasy, one of the most reliable 115 plus guys in Supercoach over the past 4 years as a Lion. He's generally a very, very safe guy to put on the field and put as a VCC. And when he's not, you can kind of see it coming right that whole week. You can see the gauntlet there, regardless of where he is. I think you're right. He'll be in that top tier of midfielders by the end of the year in Supercoach, and just probably fall away enough for salary cap coaches in Dream Team and Fantasy to maybe need an injury or a heavy tag game to make him a valuable selection in their sides. Stevie Fizz from the Draft Doctors, appreciate your work. And you guys have got some stuff coming out pretty soon for your community.
Yeah, if it's not already out, the draft kit, always a great read on the website. $20, I think, unless Cam jacks it up. Inflation, man. These inflation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Living in Queensland, man. Like it's all the Victorians moving up there.
Yeah, that's it. So that should be out if it's not already in the near future. So certainly, please head over to the website and check that out. Always help support the pod.
Absolutely. All the links for that we put in the area you need for this podcast. Just click on the links and we've got that for you there. And encourage you, if you do draft, whether you choose to draft in Supercoach or AFL fantasy format, these guys do some incredible content. And if you're not following them or purchasing the draft kit, then your drafting experience is not the same. Make sure you go and check that out. If you want to read the article on Lachie Neale, it is online for you now at coachespanel.tv. In 60 seconds, I got a little clue for you about who might be coming next in the 50 most relevant. But make sure you do read all the articles that have dropped so far. Mini Monk has just given you a little bit of a recap on his 2022 season. He's not just the newest Coaches Panel member, but chances are if you're at the top of the ranks of Dream Team, Supercoach, or AFL Fantasy, you saw that blinking name Mini Monk as a team because the guy was like stupidly top of everything. We hate him for his successful year, for how good he was across every format. But that's online. You can go and read that. And who's next in the 50 most relevant? Well, the good news is our Patreons already know. So you can join them at coachespanel.tv. They're already a day ahead. They know who's coming in at 28. Well, on Friday afternoon, Twitter kind of broke. No, it wasn't the news that Ultimate Footy was merging with AFL Fantasy. That's not the news I'm referring to. There was a certain player that had something big change in their world. How serious is it? How serious was it? We're going to talk about that player tomorrow in the 50 most relevant.